Howdy guys, we're back here in Whittier with another video. Communicate with our people, and again, just a basic questionnaire and see how they identify and see if they recognize their indigenous roots. I'm Clearbear, I'm going to be your host for today, and let's get down to it.
My heritage, I identify as a Hispanic, Latino. That's usually where I align my culture with, and more closer to my roots, at least to my family's heritage. My dad's Hispanic, he's from Mexico, and then also Guatemala, and I usually try to carry the culture like wherever I go.
That's beautiful. Did you know that the terms Hispanic, Latino, Mestizo, Mexican, or Salvadorian, a lot of these terms, actually all these terms, were created by European colonizers who came over to our continent and imposed it on the indigenous population so they could forget their roots and culture, so they could essentially just take our land and resources.
Yeah, yes, actually, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
So given that fact, how does that make you feel, one? And two, do you see yourself to some extent ever identifying as indigenous? Why not?
To that extent, it does feel like it was never actually properly given to us, or like we've stayed with it. Because the Europeans did give us those names, it doesn't really feel like it is ours. So in a sense, it actually does get me to forget that our roots mostly align with indigenous people. And in that fact, it kind of does feel almost fake, almost like a facade in a sense. But I still try to carry to the fact that I am Hispanic. Like, I try to carry that pride within me, but it does actually lead me to forget that we are indigenous people.
So do you see yourself ever in the future identifying as Native to any extent?
I'm actually not too sure, but possibly now, like maybe thinking about it later on down the line, most likely.
That's beautiful, man. What part of
My dad's from Mexico, the capital of Mexico, in DF, and my mom's from Guatemala. Yeah.
Strong Native roots there.
Yeah, that's above my face.
Hello everybody, I'm Clearbear, and I'm with special guests.
Jonathan.
Right there. So, let's get right into it. How do y'all identify?
Identify as Mexican, Latino. I actually don't know the difference. I always go Mexican or Latino.
I identify as Latino. So do you know where those terms come from?
So I kind of vaguely would say Mexican is more of the nationality. So I was born in Mexico, so I say I'm Mexican. But Latino would be more encompassing to the bigger South America, I would say.
I don't really know what it is. Okay, no worries. Thank you. Did you know that those terms, Latino, Hispanic, Mexican, El Salvadorian, Guatemalan, these nationalistic identities and cultural and linguistic identities were created by white Europeans who came over here when they were colonizing our lands in order to take over the resources? Did y'all know that?
Not really. I thought they kind of learned our language, our names for our nationalities, and then went off of that. But I don't think they taught us new language, right? So they're basing.
They did teach us new language.
Oh, they did.
So the original peoples of this continent are the Native American peoples. I know many of y'all might think that's just the United States. That's actually North, Central, and South America, any indigenous population. And they had a vast, diverse amount of cultures, philosophies, and beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Europeans essentially came over here, and then they imposed Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch in some regions, and other languages, European languages, on our people. And they forced the identities Mexican, Latino, Hispanic on the indigenous populations so that they would forget their native roots. Because it's a lot easier to take land and resources if you don't even acknowledge you're the owner, right? So for example, I go over to your house, right? And then I take a billy club and knock you on the head with a billy club, right? You wake up and you were knocked out, you don't remember anything, and I tell you, hey, this is my house. This is my house. Why are you here? Why are you in my house? You're a foreigner, you're an immigrant, right? Again, this is essentially what they did, like on a grand scale. So most of our communities are indigenous. They have indigenous roots.
Yes.
So given that, do you guys, one, how does that make you feel? Let's start with that.
Well, it's hard to familiarize or become sympathize with that because it happened so long ago, and I've been living my life fine speaking this language, which is, as you say, not my indigenous language. So I don't feel like I was done anything that was unfair. I just feel like I've been doing fine as I am. I don't feel like wronged or anything.
I think that's completely valid. But I will ask, did you know that these terms are genocidal in nature, historically speaking, of course?
Geez, like a lot of people were killed just to get these terms on us.
They killed millions. In fact, our genocide, our Holocaust of Native people, is the largest genocide in human history globally. You compare what happened to the Jews, that were 6 million people. You compare what happened to the transatlantic slave trade, the Africans, that was 2 million people. And then you compare Armenians, 1.5 million. You compare what happened to our people, 108 million people died. And we are the most least spoken about genocides of all.
That's true. I've never, like, as much as I hear it's something like they brought diseases over and the diseases like did us wrong. So it's impressive to hear 100 million.
108 million. And the thing with these diseases is they weren't accidental, they were intentional. A biological warfare against it. So how does it, again, I guess the context is this. How does it feel being on your own ancestral homeland and not even knowing that you're native to it? We're just figuring it out right now. How does it feel? I know this is a lot to take in, but this is historical fact. I'm not telling you an opinion on much history. It's suppressed.
That's dope. How do I feel? Again, I just want to say I feel nothing. It's hard to become familiar with it. There's a word I'm looking for. To feel personal about that, it's hard.
Because it's not taught to anyone to feel personal about it. And that was largely the intention. And it still is the intention. Because these terms aren't made by people who look like me and you, for us, right? For her. These terms are created with a specific purpose of genocide. Detachment.
Detachment, I feel detached to that.
Exactly. And that's the intention. That's the purpose. You're meant to feel this. It was planned and orchestrated. I know that's a lot to take in, but we're trying to educate our community so they have knowledge of self, right? So they're not kind of walking without the knowledge. Because this is important knowledge. Well, how are we gonna walk forward if we don't even know about it? Just reach each of us. And this is the purpose.
Well, Chicano, Mexican, or Mestizo, I'm not exactly sure which one.
Okay. Do you know where those terms come from? Those identity labels?
Chicano from the East LA, Mexican trying to convert to American to be accepted back in the 1900s. Mestizo because we're the motherland, a mixture of a bunch of cultures. I guess this is why a Mexican family looks, dark, brown, redhead, blonde kid, and the exact dark family. And what was the other one I said? Latino because it's supposed to be. And that's not bad, but I'm not exactly sure where we fit in.
Did you know that those terms, Chicano, well, not necessarily Chicano, but Latino, Hispanic, Mestizo, were created by white Europeans?
Okay, Latino, yeah, definitely. Hispanic, yes, definitely. Mestizo, yeah, definitely, because they had to identify are you Spanish, are you German, and anybody mixture was Mestizo.
Did you know that Mestizo actually comes from a genocidal racial hierarchy? So there is a racial hierarchy.
What does it?
Huh?
What does it? You go down to the Europe, the European class system has that hierarchy. Everything has it. Unfortunately, the darker your skin is, the more bottom you are on the totem pole.
Many native nations of this continent, pre-European colonization, did not have those caste systems.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand what you're saying. I know in India they have it, Asia they have it.
Well, it's because they were conquered by the Europeans.
Exactly. You were forced.
Yeah, it was something that was forced upon us. I used to say Mexican.
I hear you. And I guess what I'm going with this is that Mestizo was in a hierarchy, and it actually historically defined our people as subhuman to Europeans, right?
Well, I just happen to like it. I like it more than Mexican. I don't know why. I like Mexican. I can't stand Latino. Hispanic maybe. Hispanic because we speak some form of Spanish. South of the U.S. border, American. It's like when people ask, "What is your race?" I'm like,
A lot of these terms were forcibly imposed on indigenous people so that they would forget their native roots and be assimilated into a European structure, right? And
that's where Chicano came from.
yeah, and with Chicano, are you familiar with the man Jose Vasconcelos? He was the Secretary of Mexico, Secretary of Education for Mexico.
No, not.
He was a Nazi propagandist, and he wrote for a Nazi magazine called Timon, and he wrote and came up with the concept of La Raza Cósmica, right? The cosmic race.
Oh, it's a good thing I never liked La Raza, so
Exactly. Do you see yourself to some degree identifying as indigenous or native? Why or why not?
I never thought about it that way. Or, yeah, come to think of it, yeah, part indigenous and part something else. That's what mestizo is defined as. You know, you are part of the native population that was mixed in with the other part of the culture.
And I hear that and I understand.
But as far as me calling myself indigenous, nah, I kind of left that to the American Indian.
And that's interesting you note that, because when you look at American Indian, when you look at Native American, it's peoples who are indigenous
To the U.S.
supposedly. But it actually is Native American is those who are indigenous to the Americas as a continent. Hello everybody, I'm Clearbear and this is
Cassie.
And let's get down to it. So how do you identify?
I identify as Mexican.
Okay. Do you know where those terms come from? That term comes from?
I mean, besides being of Mexican descent, or I think from
Like, who created the term Mexican, or what peoples or groups created the term Mexican?
Oh, I mean, I always hear about like the Mexica, kind of the Mexica people, but I don't really know like, exactly where it comes from.
With the term Mexican, it comes from Spanish criollos, Spaniards who came over to the continent, Spanish who came over specifically to what is now called Mexico. And they basically took the name Mexica and they kind of appropriated it and they created the term Mexican, right? And again, Mexican isn't a race, it's a nationality. So anyone with a citizenship is technically a Mexican, but it's been racialized on purpose. But that term was actually created by, as we know today, Mexican is created by Whittier. And did you know that?
I mean, a bit, yeah, as far
Okay.
as like colonization, all that. Like a lot of those terms aren't our own. Just learn them, go with them, and then
A lot of those terms were imposed on our people, Latino, Hispanic, Mexican, Mestizo. All those are created by Europeans to kind of strip us of our native roots so that we could be molded into a European box, European label box, right? Because if I come over to your house, right, take a billy club and knock you on the head, and you're unconscious, right? And then you wake up, and then I tell you that, hey, you're an immigrant, you're a foreigner. This is my house. What are you doing here? You're in my house. You're not going to question me as much because you're unconscious. Right? You don't know I knocked on the head. You don't know that you're the owner of the house. So I guess with this history, and do you see yourself in any degree identifying as an indigenous or native? Why or not?
I'm not gonna say like I don't know. That question to me has always been kind of tricky because like of course we know like that's where our roots are from, but personally my family like I don't really know where we come from. Like I know only a couple generations back because that's what happens to a lot of us, right? Like when we migrate, our grandparents, our parents, whatever it is, we kind of lose a lot of that history. So it's like I don't know where like my grandparents' parents are really from or like what their like background is or whether their families immigrated from anywhere. I just know like the last few generations have been from Mexico and that's kind of all I really know. So it's not like I'm against it or anything. I just don't feel like I know enough about like where, like what indigenous culture my family would be from or like what, comes from where, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's valid,
Like I don't want to claim something and it be like, I don't even know for sure if that's like appropriative or,
Exactly. And, it's good that our communities have this conversation. This is very important, I think. And, I think we can compare it to like what happened to our black brothers and sisters, our relatives. They were brought over here with the transatlantic slave trade. They don't know their African tribal roots because of colonization, and that's valid, But yet they can still call themselves black or call themselves African American, right? But then with our people, we're on our own land, historically. And many of us don't know our tribes. We're detribalized, right? And yet there's so many prerequisites to identify as our own race, right? Like our race, it's like our part of who we are. And yeah, I mean, just with that, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've thought about before. It kind of,
That's great.
I mean, if I'm gonna be simple, it kind of sucks, you know,
Yeah,
to
it
not
sucks.
really know like where you come from exactly. Like you said, it's like we're on land here, but I don't know. It's just interesting because even within Mexico, it's like you can have different races there. You can be Mexican and have different races. So
Mexican races.
yeah, so it's like it's tricky because it's like I don't know like personally where we come from, what our roots are, what my roots are, really precisely. Which is kind of just what I use to identify because it's like an overall.
It's been racialized.
Yeah.
And it's kind of normalized that way. So there's no, that's just how it is. But again, when you look at the demographic of Mexico, right? And you look at the racial demographic, it's either like 87% full-blooded native or mixed native, but predominantly still native, but with a little bit of European in there. And please don't forget, please support our fundraiser. We're raising funds for community protection for our peoples who are protesting against kids in cages, who are standing up for the injustice and mistreatment of our people. So please, please, please support. If you can't donate money, that's fine. Please share it and spread it all across to your family members, your friends, acquaintances, everybody. Thank you so much. Stay brown, stay proud. Oh.